David, thank you for being here today to share your time and wisdom with everybody that is either tuning in or watching on the YouTube channel. So I want to thank you for sharing your time.
Absolutely, Ron. Very happy to be here.
We're gonna get to your latest book, which is quite fascinating. But before we do, I kind of want to start this with let's get to know David a little bit. And you have a really fascinating background, and some of which I can really relate to because you have a little bit of a background in endurance sports, maybe
Hmm.
more than a little. So I can at least speak that language of what that's like. But there was a time in your life when you were, and this is from your own description, you were a smoker, you were overweight, sedentary, you just weren't happy with where you were. And so I'm always fascinated because I feel like there's a lot of people in that boat. I'm fascinated. What was the catalyst for you to kind of just change your lifestyle and say, okay, enough is enough?
Yeah, enough was enough. But it's funny. You don't know what you know until you know it. I just didn't know. I was just living life, right? Everybody just is living life. Like their life is whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you go, what the hell am I doing? Like literally, what the hell am I doing? And for me, the point came where even as a little kid, I was super observant. I was very like aware of my surroundings, and that kind of made me. And I grew up in a pretty traumatic childhood, and I was always like trying to fix things and trying to make people happy. And so I think I just grew up worried about how other people were responding to me. I was seeking their approval. I was like worried about them. So I was very aware, right, and very observant, but not self-aware. And I never took that like hardcore look in the mirror and said like, who are you and what the heck do you want to be? And I did that at a time when it was just a super low point in my life. I had two I had twins. They were 4 years old. Really a tough career going, which is fine. I was a smoker. I was overweight. I was stressed out. I was not happy. I was in a marriage that was tough because she was an abusive alcoholic, and guys, you can't fight back, right? You just got to take it until you can't take it anymore, right? And you either leave or you fight back. And I never would fight back. So it just that situation just got worse and worse and worse. And I kind of found myself like at this really low point, Ron. And somebody said something to me, and somebody could have said it a week earlier or 2 weeks later, and it wouldn't have hit me. But it hit me right at the right time. And I was complaining to him. I was just like, dude, I mean, Chris, this is like I'm at my rope's end. I'm just tired of. I'm tired of the abuse. I'm tired of her anger. I'm tired of all this nonsense. I'm tired of the stress and blah, blah, blah. And I'm bawling my eyes out to him. And he goes, dude, she's not the problem. Like life is not the problem. You're the problem.
Mm.
And I'm like, what? And I got all angry and I'm like, I'm not the problem. Do you know about this and about this and about that? And he goes, yeah. He goes, every problem in your life, you treat it as if knowing that it's a rabid dog, you could still pet it and it's not going to bite you. He goes, life doesn't care about your feelings. She doesn't know any better. Like bad things happen. It's not personal to you. Why don't you think about you and why you keep putting yourself in a position to always want to try to go pet the rabid dog? Because you need to fix you. You don't need to
Mm.
fix anybody else. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, holy cow. So you mean I have a part in this whole nonsense? Right? Because I didn't think that I did. I was always worried about the other side of it. And then I went, oh man, maybe he's right. Maybe I do have to take a look at myself. And that was the start of it. Somebody just said the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, and I've heard somebody say this, and I hear this idea of victim mentality, right? And a lot of people say, "Well, I don't have victim mentality," but even myself, that knows a lot about that, I sometimes slip into that where I want to blame others or blame fate. So I hear a little bit of that, but I heard somebody say this once: "You are living exactly the life you have created for yourself." And I said, whoa, I was kind of like you. I said, wait a minute. If my life
Mhm.
sucks, there's a lot of things that are external that I didn't wish or, whatever. And basically what he was saying is you have the power to change that. And so I hear echoes of that. And the idea that sometimes we plant seeds, right? And it just takes the right timing for those seeds to finally grow. And maybe that's what happened. So, all right. So here we are. You've had this
Mhm.
catalyst. What was the next step? Did you go, I'm going to go do an Ironman?
So I'll tell you what. Here's what the next step was, and just the progression of our discussion made me think about this, and that is that along the way to that point, I had learned a ton of different lessons. Right, I had been homeless. I've been robbed of everything at gunpoint when I was a teenager. I had run $100 million business for a major Wall Street firm with no college education. Right. I mean, I'm doing like I've learned a ton of lessons. I just never applied them to myself. Right. I was a great leader. I was a great manager. I was great like motivator, but I never one time tried to look at myself and go,
Mm,
dude, why don't you apply a little bit about what you learned to yourself? I, so I think that when I did that, in this very short period of time, I realized maybe I was the problem. Then I said, if you're the problem, then why don't you live the life you want to live, like you were just saying, right? Why don't you try to be who you're going to be, which meant I don't want to be married to an abusive alcoholic. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to be a smoker, right? I want to start worrying about the guy in the mirror, which means you're going to have to look in the mirror and see who the hell you want to be. Like what are you and who do you want to be? And then I realized, oh my gosh, I can start this process of working on myself, and which is really weird because who does that in their late 30s, right? Like takes a conscious like switch like that, but it's just some light turned on that just said, okay, you're supposed to worry about yourself. Like you're supposed to, like, stop fixing everybody else's problems and fix your own problems. And then at the same time, that was even given a little more starkness because at that same period of time when I'm saying, okay, I got to start taking a purposeful steps down my own path, and it's okay to do that. I got to fix my own, stuff, and I got to figure out who I want to be. At that same time that I'm beginning this journey, I get a call from my sister who says, she's long down her journey. She's married happily, kids, great career, great friends, living a really, really good life. We're very close in age. Um, and she gets uh, um, told that she has terminal brain cancer. So now she's starting down a journey where she's going to be ending her life. I'm feeling at that same point in time that I'm beginning a journey where I'm just starting to live. So it definitely had a little more kind of
mm.
urgency and poignancy to the task at hand, because I had to be faced with the reality that, if I was her, would I have so much regret about what I'm going to leave behind? I don't think I would have. Now I would, right? Because I'm living a much better life, and so that really helped light a fire under me as well.
Yeah, don't feel bad that you went through this in your late 30s. I went through it in my late 40s.
Mm,
I like to say I wish I would have figured it out sooner, but I also am quick to say I'm glad I figured it out. There's people that go right to the end of their life and never figure it out. So it's never too late. If you're listening and you feel like your life's not fulfilling and something's missing, maybe it's time to do what David and I have done and take a closer look and say, is this it? Is this the life I want? So I'm hearing a confluence, and this is starting to lead into your latest book, a confluence of kind of situations where you said, all right, it's time for me to look at my life differently. What do I want to be? And your sister was, diagnosed with terminal cancer. I have a friend that's going through some pretty rough stuff with cancer right now, and I got to be honest. I oftentimes think about that could be me tomorrow, and I watch him, fight this with courage and strength, but I also keep that in mind that all right, Ron, this could be you. We never know, right? And so time's a wasting. Let's live that life now. So all right, so here we are, and
yeah.
let's go right to your book. I mean, you wrote a book called Cycle of Lives, and I'm not going to give away the good stuff here, but it's a crazy, wild story. And it was all driven by a little bit of what your sister went through. So tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about Cycle of Lives and maybe an overview of what the book is about. Because again, what a
sure.
great story.
Yeah, it's a really great book. I mean, I say that, but I mean, it's really I wrote it, so I'm supposed to say it's a great book, right? But it really is a moving, inspirational, powerful book. And where it came along is this. So I started along this journey of I want to become healthy and I want to become a non-smoker and I want to start worrying about myself and applying the lessons that I've learned to better my own life. And I did that, right? I went from putting down cigarettes to 3 weeks later running a 5K, a month later running a 10K, and 7 or 8 months later I did my first Ironman, right?
Wow.
So my progression was pretty hardcore. Since then, I've done like 17, 18 Ironmans, 100-mile runs, you name it, a bunch of junk. But I'm right in the heart of trying to figure out this whole endurance thing and navigating, this kind of like first few steps along my path and watching my sister on the last few steps of hers. And she made this pact with me. She said, "Look, David," she goes, "I know I'm really sick. I know I'm going to die soon, but there's this thing called a Relay for Life. It's put on by the American Cancer Society, and they put a team together, and everybody from the team walks on the track, excuse me, for some part of a 24-hour event, and it's used for education and for bonding and for inspiration and just to support and raise money, and it's this whole big thing, and it's done all around the country. It's a huge deal." And she said, "I want to be out there for the whole 24 hours. I want to watch all the people cheering me on." And I was like, "Well, geez, man, if you're going to, in your condition, be out there for 24 hours, I'll run the whole 24 hours." And so we made this pact a couple of months before the event. And like 2 days before the event, she dies. So she's
Ooh.
not able to get out there and watch it. But I am able to get out there. So I go out there for the whole 24 hours and I'm running around the track, from morning until night and then through the night and back into morning. And I noticed, Ron, that there was a common theme um, that that hit me. And when it hit me, I started to investigate it, and it was absolutely a common theme. And that is that people are good, not everybody, but most people are good at dealing with the tasks of their cancer. How do I get treatment? How do I get my kids watched when I go to chemo? What sources are there for me to have a better diet? These kind of things are good about. But when it talks about the feelings, when talking about what does it feel like? What are you going through? How are you dealing with this, right? Um, uh, the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment, the fear, the desperation, the loneliness, all it, how are we dealing with when it came to those kind of things? The vast majority of people weren't able to have those hard discussions. And I know positively because I can say this with absolute certainty. We all know somebody. Now you know somebody that's going through something, but we all know somebody who's going through something, or who we kind of have a sense that they might have gone through something, but we kind of, oh, we don't want to like invade that feeling space. We don't want to like get too personal and say the wrong thing and maybe make them think about the negative side of what they're going through by our dumb questions or whatever. And so we kind of pull away, and so we don't have the tools really to engage in like heart centered, authentic talks about the emotional facets of it. And so I wanted to write a book that would investigate, a ton of different people's perspectives on that issue.
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm almost feeling, I feel like I'm feeling bad right now because as you say this, I'm thinking of my friend who may actually be listening to this podcast right now, and I've never really asked him, "How are you doing?" From an emotional standpoint. He doesn't talk about it. I don't ask about it, and so it's this
Mm-hmm.
unspoken thing. How can we get better at that? Do you have any advice from what you learned from my standpoint? How do I broach that topic? And again, I feel like I don't want to bring it up because it's negative, and that's depressing, and I don't know, maybe we just gloss over that's again probably faulty thinking on my part, but that's where my mind is.
It's an easy place to go, Ron. I mean, it's easy to not talk about those things because it's like, oh man, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to sound like an a-hole. If I invade their space, maybe like they're having a good day and I'm going to bring them down. There's a million things that could go on where you got to go, geez, I don't want to talk about it, but it's possible, and it's more likely the case that people are wondering, geez, why am I so isolated? Like, why are people kind of, stiff arming me, or, even, figuratively with the emotional thing in this, why aren't they asking me how I'm doing? And other people, they're like, maybe your friend doesn't want sympathy. Maybe he doesn't want you to feel all sorry for him and look at him with puppy dog eyes, but maybe he wants to know that you care. I don't know the answers to those questions, right?
Okay.
But what I learned from talking to people, and I spoke to oncologists, surgeons, nurses, survivors, loved ones, people that had been through cancer 5 different times in their adult life, people who were coming out of trauma such as abuse and suicide of a parent, and I mean drug addiction, you name it. Like I wanted a full range of everybody we know all wrapped into a bunch of stories so that we could learn, like, what do you do? And I can't tell you what to do with your friend, but I can tell you that some of the things that you could learn from these stories of real non-anonymous people might spark something in you that might tell you what to do. Like for me, and I'm not saying it's wrong if somebody does this, but for me, anytime somebody tells me something like, oh, I just found out my friend, their kid is going through cancer, or I just found out this piece of bad news about a coworker, or excuse me, this is happening to, I don't ever say I'm sorry, right? Because I've heard too many times from people, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. It wasn't your fault. You didn't do this. So don't tell me you're sorry. You can't make it better
Mm,
by telling me that you're sorry. So I go, okay. And instead of, like, for example, if somebody says, yeah, I lost my grandfather to cancer, I don't go, oh my gosh, that's so sad. I go, wow, were you close? Or I'll say, oh my gosh, no way. How long ago was that? How do you feel about it? Like, oh my God, do you miss him? No, he was a total jerk. I'm glad the guy's gone. Well, whatever, right? You don't
sure.
know the answer to the question, but it's very, very rare instance. If you do it in a connective, real, authentic way, and you're not trying to give them sympathy, you're not trying to compare your broken finger to their cancer, right? You're not right. You don't minimize things. You don't throw on this kind of false sympathy thing. I think if you connect in a way, you can't say the wrong thing wrong. You cannot say the wrong thing. I just feel like not saying anything is the wrong thing. If you
Mhm.
say something, you can't say the wrong thing if you're doing it from an authentic, heart-centered way.
Gosh, this brings back some old memories. I once had a former girlfriend that passed away, and a lot of people reached out to me, and that was wonderful that they did. But I remember thinking about 8 out of 10 of them said the wrong thing, or
Mm-hmm.
things. I know their heart was in the right place, but I felt like they just a lot of it was exactly what you're saying is I'm sorry, or something along those lines, and it just I remember thinking about that time that most people don't know what to say in that situation, and they try, but they oftentimes do not do a good job with that. And I think your advice is great. Have empathy, and just say, as Brene Brown would say, just say, I don't know what to say, but I'm glad you told me. That could be enough, and I think you would agree with that from what you said. That don't try to fix it. I think a lot of people want when somebody passes away, that's what we try to do, right? We want to take away your pain. I want to take away your pain, David.
Right.
And so something that I'm going to say, I think is going to do that. And maybe we just need to sit with that pain, right? Is it kind of
Yeah.
what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's absolutely, and it's okay. I mean, look, at bad things freaking happen all the time, and it just sucks, and it's a part of life, and you don't want it to happen. And you know what? But it most of the time, it can't be what defines you. most of the time it is something that you have to deal with, and it's unfortunate. You have a lot of wonderful things happen to you. Sometimes we have horribly tragic things to happen to us. And I mean, I can't speak to where you're at now or where you were when you lost your girlfriend back then, right? But I do know that I've heard from the book participants, and I understand where they come from now, that if you and I were to have a discussion where you told me that, I wouldn't go, "Oh man, that must have been tough." What I would say is, "Oh my God, what was it like? How long ago was that? Like, how have you dealt with that?" Like, right? Because I
Mm,
feel like by asking questions, it allows you to tell me what you're feeling. It gives you a safe space to know this dude like is actually caring, right? And I'm not, I'm not telling you, I'm not trying to make it better. I'm not telling you whatever. I'm not comparing it to some loss I had, right? I don't know. One of my book participants, Bobby, he had this crazy, crazy story. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. Tough fighter, you know, um, uh, uh, not a real fighter like you were, but I mean a fighter,
hmm
um, angry at the world. One wife cheated on him, the other wife became a drug addict, and he's just done with women. It's like life is horrible. His business partner screws him. He's going out of business. He's near bankruptcy, and he's just as angry as a man could ever be. And all of a sudden, he meets this angel, and he falls instantly in love with her, and she falls instantly in love with him, and she's the greatest thing ever. She's everything positive that you could want in a partner. Brings out the best in him, he brings out the best in her. They're great together. Shortly after they meet, she gets breast cancer. They fight it. They get married. Right before they get married, the breast cancer comes back, and it comes back pretty aggressively. They get married. They deal with treatment. Within a year or change, she's gone. You know, just every kind of metastasis you could imagine. And um, fast forward to, I mean, like what a freaking horrible situation. I mean,
yeah, I'm
imagine you,
feeling it as you say it.
yeah, imagine you finally get to that level, right? And to understand his transformation is to understand what Brandy told him before she died. She's like, "I'm so pissed off because somebody's going to get the best Bobby. Like I made you the best man you're ever going to be, and somebody else is going to be able to enjoy that. But nobody is going to be able to enjoy it until you go get therapy, you deal with this loss." I mean, they talked about everything, right?
Mm,
So she passes away. Obviously, it's hard, but he's already kind of processed it because they talked about everything. And shortly thereafter, he meets someone. Okay, somebody that he knew in high school that he had a small affair with, and this is obviously later in life, and they've been married for maybe 6 or 8 years. When I spoke to him about his story, and he said to me, he said, and it's just a wonderful, inspirational thing. He said to me, "What I went through is the most horrible thing you could ever imagine. And if she didn't die, we would be happily married. We would have kids. We would be living this incredible life." He goes, "But that didn't happen. She died." He goes, "And the life I have now, I wouldn't trade it for a thing. I
mm,
am happy. I'm married to somebody who makes me feel good every single day." He goes, "I love my life. It could have gone a different way, but it didn't." And I'm just like, whoa, right? That is some serious perspective. Is that whole like if that didn't happen, I'd be in a much different place. But I'm here now, and I'm as happy as I could be. So I can't I can't dwell on the tragedy that I went through. It was tragic. It was horrible. It was the worst thing to ever happen. But I'm here today, and I'm in a good place today. I'm in the best place I could ever be, he says. Imagine. And that's a real important lesson to take.
yeah, gosh, and I'm sure you're familiar with the term post traumatic growth. I mean, this sounds like
Mhm.
post traumatic growth, and I'm fascinated by that topic and why some people tend to go the path of this gentleman, and some go down certainly a more negative path, and why is that? I don't, I think the answers are not easy from what I've read in the research, but it is fascinating to me that something that tragic can actually kind of be a catalyst to a better life for some people. All right, so back to our,
Mhm.
this book. We're talking about this book, but for our listeners that are going, okay, you got to give me some more details on this book. You talk about these
Right.
people you've talked to. How many were there?
Yep.
What did this crazy adventure entail?
Yep.
Where did you go, and how did you get there? Those
Yeah.
kind of things. Like, give me a little lay of the land of what this
It,
book
well,
is
it's pretty
about.
cool. It's pretty cool because what I look, we talked about it. I don't know if we talked about it at the beginning of the podcast or right before when we were talking a little bit. Is there's like these winners, right? These overachievers, these really inspirational kind of like one-off stories, like But honestly, I don't have much in common with Elon Musk or Oprah Winfrey or Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or whomever. I don't have anything in common with them. I mean, their stories are kind of interesting and inspirational, but honestly, can I apply it to my own life? No, I'm never going to grow up to be Shaq, right? It's just not going to happen. So I'm not really moved by those kind of stories. Like they're interesting and they're fun, but I don't know how to apply that stuff to my own life. What I can apply to my own life is real life, like what you learn when you're running 100 miles, what you see somebody inspire in you because of the circumstances that they go through. And these kind of things move me. And I feel like these kind of things move most people. So what I wanted to do is to grab a range of age, just everything from the fear of cancer to living with cancer your whole life, from a caregiver to a receiver to a survivor to a loved one. I wanted people who had crazy, wild emotional responses, everything from anger and fear to, if you can imagine, gratitude for their cancer. Um, and I wanted to all different types of cancer, and I wanted to talk about. So, Ron, if cancer came into their life, no matter caregiver, receiver, whatever, that was point A. Today is point B. How do they go from A to B emotionally in relation to the traumas that happened before A? So the things that you and I can identify with: suicide, death of a spouse, um, drug addiction, abandonment, bankruptcy, making bad decisions, having a bad childhood, whatever. How did those things affect them along this emotional journey? So I called hospitals and cancer centers and I asked friends, hey, who do you know that's got a really cool story? And I just kind of filled in this wheel of all these different things so that I could give this 360 view of this emotional experience. So then when I found all these people, I talked to them on the phone, um, sometimes dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. Sometimes we weren't able to go where we needed to go and they kind of fell by the wayside, or I wasn't skilled enough to take them where we needed to go, or it was too raw, or it was too boring, or whatever. But then eventually I got down to the 15 stories that were in the book that are just stunningly unique and inspirational and really impactful, evocative stories. And then I said, well, hey, if we're all connected by story and we're connected by emotion, why don't I get on a bike and why don't I bike to go meet all these people for the first time who I'd been talking to for the last couple of years? So I biked basically from California to Florida and then up to New York in kind of a zigzaggy way. You'll understand this as an endurance athlete. I did 4,700 miles in 45 days.
Whew.
So I did a lot. It's like two Tour de France's back to back, like with not a whole lot of help. No Peloton. I'm out there on my own. And then I connected the stories. So the book is each one of these 15 stories told first person from their perspective. So I'm not in the story. It's not a preachy prescriptive kind of thing. It's just a little novelette, a little tiny little 15 to 25-page story of their life. And then in between that, I talk about the people I met along the way of the bike ride, kind of processing the emotions of losing my sister and life and lessons learned and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I'm thinking to myself. Number one, I've done a couple multi-day rides, and just so we can put this in perspective, my
Yeah.
multi-day rides are 3 days, about 60 miles a day. So
Yeah.
roughly 180 miles in three
Yeah.
days, and you're doing roughly 100 miles a day for 45 days. Wow, that
120 a day on a big steel bike and run. If you ever tried to bike across the country, especially from California to Florida and up to New York, just realize there's only one truth, and that it doesn't matter what direction you're heading, the wind is always in your face. It's literally,
Uh,
it was like, it was like biblical. It was like, are you kidding
yes.
me? I mean, if I'm going south, the wind's coming from the south. If I'm heading east, it's coming in from the east. If I'm heading northeast, it's coming in from the northeast. It was brutal, brutal.
Yeah, I'm laughing because if you spend any time in endurance sports, it's crazy. You'll do an out and back race, and anybody that's an endurance athlete on this that's listening knows what I'm talking about. You can do an out and back race, and it's like the wind's in your face on the way out, and you turn around, and the
Yeah.
wind switches directions, and it's in
Oh
your
my
face
God.
again.
I did that. I did Ironman Chattanooga in September, this past September. Just for those listening, that's like 5, 6 months ago. And it's exactly that. I'm like on the outward bound. I'm like, why is the wind in my face? Well, at least I'll have it on my back.
Yeah,
Wait, how did it turn? Oh, wait, it's later in the day. It's warmer. Okay, I get it. But why? It's just so
yeah,
stupid. But then, um, yeah, whatever, but it did cause for some long days, Ron. I took 4 days off in 45 days.
wow,
So I biked for 41 days, 4,700 miles. That's about 120 miles a day. The longest day I think was 156. The shortest day was about 80. And most days were 11 to 13 or 14 hours because I'm stopping along the way. I got flat tires because I'm on the highway. I'm on the
yeah,
interstates
yeah,
the whole time. So I'm getting a lot of flat tires every day from all the little blown
mm-hmm.
apart steel belted radials. And then, I got to hydrate. I got to get my food. I got to change. Oh, it was crazy, crazy, crazy long days. But also for anybody that does endurance athletics, you also know that those long stretches can be super contemplative. And so I was able to contemplate the stories and really be present with what was going on around me. Every single day, I ran into people who would tell me, "Oh my God, my grandfather just died, and I don't know what to say to my grandma." Or somebody at work, just told me something, and I don't even know what to say to him. And like, oh, I don't want to talk to. Half my family doesn't even know I had cancer. I don't like to talk about it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what the heck? Every single day I ran into somebody who had the same kind of theme of they weren't really equipped to talk about or to talk to others about this thing of cancer, the emotional side of it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking to myself, I've done a couple rides where I was in the saddle for 10 hours, and I always laugh, and you probably could relate to this. Is once you spent 10 hours on a bicycle saddle, which I sometimes I think they're torture devices, you'll never look at an airline seat as uncomfortable ever again. You go, once you've done that, nothing
That's the
else
truth.
is nearly in my mind as uncomfortable as that. So, well, here's the thing. All right, so David, I love this. You're going to go visit these 15 people. Why not just jump on an airline and fly and go see these people? Why did you say I'm going to do this as a 5,000-mile bike trip?
Uh, you know, I'd like to say there's some noble purpose of it. Started out being kind of gimmicky because I said to myself, oh, I got this 360, this wheel of emotion. I've got this, there's a famous um, uh, uh, Guy Plotchick who came out with the Wheel of Emotions, and then I got the Wheel of Ages, and I've got this whole section I'm filling in, and I'm like, oh man, it's like a wheel. It's like a wheel on a bicycle. So I come up with this logo of the cyclist on this infinity sign with a couple of wheels, and I'm like, wow, man, I'm like filled in every little section in between all the spokes. I've covered like 360 of everything. And then I keep talking about how we're all connected by story, and who doesn't? When you say, hey, let me tell you a story, who doesn't lean in, right? That we all want to hear a good story. We're all connected by the same kind of basic emotions. So I said, what better way to connect everybody than to draw a line across the country connecting them? And kind of I was thinking about something I wrote in the book, and it's so powerful only because I lived it. But um, everybody, I kept coming up with this word. I was about 3,000 miles in, so before it hit me. But I was worried about each individual's problems, including my own problems. And I just started thinking everybody has problems. Like every single person, like everybody has these issues. And some a lot more stark than others. Some turn out fine and some don't turn out fine, but everybody is going through something or has gone through something. Everybody has a deep-seated emotional trauma on whatever scale it is.
Hmm.
And honestly, I'm not going to say that losing a fingertip is any less traumatic than losing an arm, right? I'm not judging it. They're both traumatic, right? They're both trauma. Um, Losing a third cousin can be just as traumatic as losing a loved one. I don't know what the, I'm not judging, right? Trauma is trauma. And everybody's living their own life. And so I thought, everybody, well, that's a cool thing. So I'm glad that I did the bike ride because I got such in depth every single day running into this recurring theme that everybody is dealing with these issues. Everybody's dealing with how do I navigate the emotional side of this trauma, whatever it is, and how do I talk to people? How do I stop self-isolating? How do I give a space for people to talk to me? How do I invade their space to talk to them? These are things that everybody was dealing with and is dealing with. And so it just made it more purposeful that I went on the bike ride.
Yeah, I think there's a good message in there, right? And I think a lot of people like to think that their problems are unique, right? Nobody else is suffering like I am, or there's something very special about my problems. And I think the first thing we want to realize is, yeah, everybody's got their problems, everybody's got their suffering, and there's somebody out there that is going through something very similar to what you're going through.
Or
And
has,
yeah,
right? Let me tell you a quick story, right? One of the guys I spoke to, okay, he's very well off financially. Okay. Married, couple of kids. He's the chief medical officer of a big insurance plan. He is like king of the world, right? At least you would think. Commands respect. He's got a good station in life, and he talks like he's like so calm in who he is and comfortable in his skin. Excuse me. And as I talked to him, because I'm actually asked him if he knew anybody that might be good for the book. And then as I started talking to him, I realized, oh, he's good for the book. So what do you realize when I go down further? He's got he went through a horrible divorce before. He's married now and happily married, but he at one time in his life he went through a horrible divorce, like the worst, one of the worst stories I've ever heard. Okay, and part of that was in part because he has a severely disabled son, and that he cares for. And I'm like, wow, imagine like he had to gone through that. So I'm getting to the end of his story, and we're talking about how he's like one generation away from maybe ending up in the farm, in the fields, as a farm worker. He's like one generation away from that, right? And so he's got this whole life that he's leading early in life is to say, he's being told by his relatives, and he's thinking, I got to do better. I got to go to school. I got to get my education. I got to become a doctor. Right. I got to like get as far away from that reality as possible. And when he's going through his divorce and he's a doctor and he's having tough time with his jobs because he's the 100% full-time caregiver for his kids, including one who's severely disabled, he tells me of a day when he realized he loved his life. And I said, wow, when was that? And he goes, I, my kids were at school and I didn't have any money in the bank. And he goes, I'd moved from job to job because of all these situations. And it was like kind of desperate. Like I had to go get my paycheck in order to cash it to go to the grocery store. So I get in the car and the car's empty. And I open my wallet and I go, fuck, man, I don't have any credit cards. I don't have any cash. He goes, well, what am I going to do? He goes, I'm a freaking doctor. I don't have any money. So he goes into the house and he starts pulling the cushions off the sofas and he
mm,
digs around for change, and he goes through all his drawers and he finally gets like several bucks together. He goes and gets gas. He goes to pick up his paycheck. He cashes it. He goes to the store. He picks up some spaghetti and he's sitting around the dinner table with his kids watching a movie, eating spaghetti, going, I mean, what the hell? I love my life. What am I going to do? Now, when I look at that guy, do I ever know that he had that kind of trauma in his life? Hell no. You never know what people have gone
yeah.
through. I could not imagine that a guy like that fully into his career, fully into life, is digging through his sofa for change. Now, if a guy like that, overcoming what he's overcome and going through what he's gone through, and the trauma and the embarrassment and the shame and the anger and all of this stuff, and he's digging for coins, going, "I love my life." What the hell do I have to complain about?
Good point. It's perspective, right? And I think, certainly we're not going to go down this rabbit hole, but this is the problem with a lot of social media is we see these people and we think, oh, there's nothing, they got such a great life and mine's all screwed up, but theirs is I don't know, I'll use the word perfect. And we don't know what's behind the curtain, right? As you said, again, I have yet to meet anybody, and I've met some pretty successful. I'm going to put successful in quotes. I've met some very successful people, even on this podcast. And when they get honest, they say, "Yeah, I have my struggles too." So I think for everybody that's listening, just realize you're not the only one that maybe is searching your your couch cushions for a little bit of money. I certainly did that when I was in college.
Yeah, because you imagine your doctor was doing that
Yeah, yeah,
just
that's
a
a good
couple of
point.
years
That's a
ago,
good point.
and he had to do it because he lost everything in a divorce, and he lost everything in a divorce because he wanted to give his child personal care.
Yeah,
And I mean, imagine what he had gone through, and it just gives you so much, like what you just said, perspective. But I love this idea that we're just passerbyers in everybody else's life, and they're just passerbyers in ours. And so what you see is not really what's there. Just like
good,
nobody knows
good.
you, right? You got to live your
Yep.
own life. You got to live your own life.
We're all connected in that way. All right,
Mhm.
so here we are. Again, roughly 5,000 miles on a bike and long days on the bike. And I know from my endurance background, those that you get locked inside your mind. A lot of people ask me when you run 50 miles, what's that? Do you get bored? And I go, well, yeah. You're stuck with an audience of one for a long time, and you did this multiple days. I have to assume you learned a lot about yourself in
Mhm.
in that time. How did this? And I was gonna call it a project. How did this project change you? But how did this story change you, David, as you rode across this country, roughly 5,000 miles, and meet all these people? You came out of this a different person. I would have to assume. What did you learn from that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ron. I could make a list of, and I certainly talk about it in the book. I make a list of, I didn't make a list of lessons learned, but I talk about all the, I learned dozens and dozens of just very, very impactful lessons. I mean, I'll never forget, I'm in Louisiana. Okay. At the end of just a absolutely brutal day. And the only restaurant open is this little family Italian restaurant, right? And I pull in. Buddy was there with me. Had flown out to support me for a couple of days, and we're just gobbling up all this food. And the waitress overhears me talking, so we start talking about the project, and she's like, "Oh my God, cancer's been in my life, and here's why." And all of a sudden, then another waitress comes by, and then the owner comes by. So the owner and the three waitresses were talking to us for the rest of the night. It's a tiny little family restaurant. At the end of the night, the owner says, "No, I'm buying your meal." And I'm like, "Oh, that's very sweet." And the three waitresses say, "Can we take your picture with you?" And so I took a picture, and they said, "We really want to thank you for what we're doing. It wouldn't be the worst thing for us to give you a night full of tips to give, because they know all the money's going to charity." And it was the sweetest thing ever. And I get back to the hotel, and I make a little deposit into the thing from my credit card to make up for the cash. And I open up the envelope. It's got like $60 in it. And I'm like, that was a night's tip for three women who might have had second jobs, might have been single, might have been helping to support a family. And I'm some stranger that comes by and they want to give a night's worth of, I mean, what? I realize that people are better than you think they are if you give them a chance. And also, I really learned so much more behind that thought of you never know what people have gone through or what they're going through. So I'm not going to say I'm more sympathetic, but I'm more compassionate, probably, and a little more patient to judge, and a little, also probably a little more patient to not judge myself so harshly, because people, everybody's going through stuff, and I think the shame is in not recognizing it in yourself and in anybody else, because then you can't grow and you can't connect. And for me, that you know just getting a little bit off topic, but all that transformation comes from like being aware of where you're at, like forgiving yourself for not being a certain way, and then leaning into who you want to be. And and I'm forced to lean into being a compassionate person, having met all these unbelievable, fantastic people who were so giving and so thoughtful and so um, uh, searching for an answer to how do we deal with these things, and it just bonded us closer, even if for just for a minute. And so that's the lesson I learned most, is that everybody's going through something, and if we can connect at a deeper level, it's very, very meaningful, even if it's
Hmm.
just in passing, even if it's just in passing.
Yeah. And I feel like that's going to be my lesson to take away from this, especially in this divided time that we, especially in the United States, just trust the good. You know, people are better. I mean, I think we're getting very divided, and we're looking at people as the enemy. And I think what I'm hearing from you is there's good in people if we give them a chance to show that and to connect with them. I think people want to connect and know that they're being seen and heard, right?
Mhm.
This is good stuff. And I want to be, certainly want to be respectful of your time. We're running out of time here. This has been a fun conversation, but how, David, can people connect with you, work with you? I think you do speaking. What do you got going on, and how can people get involved?
Sure. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So if it's for like a cancer organization or a nonprofit type event, I do speaking for free. The books are sold, whether they're sold through Amazon and my publisher takes their cut, or they're sold directly and I get the proceeds. Whatever comes to me from my publisher from directly goes to charities, and the charities are listed in the book because each one of the book participants chose an organization that was special to them. So I said, okay, we'll support those in perpetuity. So book sales, whether it's Audible and Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever, when I do speaking gigs, sometimes somebody will buy hundreds of books or whatever. All the proceeds just go directly to those charities. Um, so that's that. They can find information on cycleoflives.org. They could look at David Richman, Cycle of Lives, get the book. The Audible is awesome, totally moving. 15 different actors, each one doing one of the different people. It's very moving, very inspirational. I have it in tablet form, books, wherever books are sold. And, thankfully the book is doing well. And people, they respond to me like, I didn't know it was so inspirational. Like I thought it was going to be super heavy. And a lot of the stories are heavy, but they're very inspirational too. And what can we learn from that? Because who isn't going through, or who hasn't gone through heavy times, right?
Yeah, good. And all of that, as always, will be in the show notes. All those links that David just mentioned. So let's get to our signature question, David.
Uh-oh.
If yeah, this is the tough one. What is your greatest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, like so I didn't exactly uh, come as a shock that you were going to ask me that question, but look, I made bad financial decisions, been failures, right? I probably have made a lot of, but I mean, if I were to, if if you were to have to say, okay, listen, you're going to give me your house, that this one is not your biggest failure, even though it's going to sound a little trite, um, it really is the biggest failure, and but I've forgiven myself for it, and that is, I didn't worry about myself until too late in life. Like, man, if I would have just taken some of my own advice that I was dishing out, if the lessons that I was learning through difficult things I've gone through that was helping other people or furthering my career or whatever, but I never like focused it on myself. And I'd say my biggest failure, although I've forgiven myself and long moved on from it, but gosh, I wish somebody would have been along early in life to tell me, like, it's supposed to be hard, like it's okay, like it's supposed to be hard, like like don't just fight against how hard it is, right? and don't try to fix everything, and don't all these lessons. If I could have just like listened to myself. So I think my biggest failure is not being told to, or not understanding that I need to worry about myself first. And thankfully I've learned it early enough in life that I can lean into how to become a better person, but I sure would have liked to have been on that path a lot sooner.